Now, a Storm Team 2 special presentation. Hurricane Central, before, during, and after the storm.
Hi everyone, I'm Storm Team 2 Chief Meteorologist Rob Fowler, and welcome to our Hurricane Special show before, during, and after the storm. Storm Team 2 is here to make sure you are safe and informed, and in the next half hour, we'll discuss last year's storms, this year's outlook, and how you can prepare for a storm and all its impacts.
The devastation here is just unbelievable.
This year marks 30 years since Hurricane Hugo changed the lives and the landscape of our area forever. September 22nd, 1989, it made landfall on Sullivan's Island as a Category 4 hurricane. But as devastating as it was for many, it could have been much worse, as the strongest winds and highest storm surge missed highly populated areas.
People went through Hugo, but they might not have gone through the absolute worst of Hugo, which might only have occurred over a very small area right near landfall where the peak storm surge and peak winds were. Don't let Hugo kill you 30 years later. You know, and I say that a lot, because don't let the last hurricane kill people again because they make their decisions based on what happened in the past and about what they might remember or misremember about their experience 30 years ago, or what they were told by their neighbors or their family or their friends.
Now, just because you made it through a bad one doesn't mean you can make it through the next, so take your preparations for each storm seriously. For a third year in a row, the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season had an above-average number of intense storms, including a devastating Category 5. Storm Team 2 meteorologist Josh Marthers has a recap.
The 2018 season, an above-normal season in the Atlantic, with 15 named storms, 8 of those becoming hurricanes, and 2 of those major hurricanes. That would be Florence and Michael. Both of those names retired, and both of those having some impacts here in the Carolinas. The first, Florence, the most notable for North and South Carolina, becoming a tropical storm on September 1st, then a hurricane on September 4th. The storm then makes a shift to the west as it passes south of Bermuda as a Category 4 hurricane, marching its way toward the coast of North Carolina, making landfall as a Category 1 hurricane. 90-mile-per-hour sustained winds near Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. Post-landfall, the storm crawled across southeastern North Carolina and northeastern South Carolina, dumping rain measured in feet in some areas, not inches, with as much as 15 inches reported as far south as Georgetown County, where across the lower part of the low country, hardly anything at all from that storm. Catastrophic flooding occurred across eastern North Carolina and parts of South Carolina, and that's how Florence will be remembered. Now, the next monster on the list, Michael, becoming a Category 1 hurricane very quickly, pretty much right after becoming a tropical storm, strengthening quickly to a major hurricane and then making landfall as a Category 5 just east of Panama City, Florida. This is the first U.S. Category 5 strike since Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Only 2 others on the list. That would be Camille and the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. Michael still producing major wind damage as far north as Albany, Georgia, then weakening to a tropical storm as it made its way through the Carolinas, still producing wind damage and isolated tornadoes across both North and South Carolina. 2018, a season above normal, and 2 names retired. That would be Florence and Michael.
All right, thanks, Josh. One of the questions I'm asked most often around hurricane season is, what does the season look like? Each and every year, the answer is the same.
It only takes one. That is the message every year as hurricane season forecasts come out, either before the season begins or updated during the June 1st to November 30th time period set aside and known as the official hurricane season. Of course, the last 5 years we've had a recorded storm before June 1st. This year was no different. Andrea formed in the month of May. Still, the technology and expertise is there to give us an idea of what we can expect in any given year. So what are we expecting this year? NOAA, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, gives us a range. The experts there are expecting between 9 and 15 named storms, 4 to 8 hurricanes, and 2 to 4 major hurricanes. This year, average to slightly above average numbers are expected. So what is average? In a normal year, we would have 12 named storms, winds reaching at least 39 miles per hour and a close circulation. Of those 12, 6 will reach at least 74 miles an hour and be designated a hurricane, and of those 6, 3 will exceed 110 miles per hour, which we designate a major hurricane. Another well-respected team which forecasts each and every year is from Colorado State University. Started in the mid-1980s by the late Dr. William Gray and now continued by Dr. Phil Klotzbach, this group gives us one number for each designation. 14 named storms, 6 hurricanes, 2 major hurricanes are forecast this season. Reasons for the forecast have many different moving parts. El Nino, a periodic warming of the waters off the coast of South America, is the wild card. The strength of this El Nino is in question. Typically, in a strong El Nino year, the numbers are down. Even if that happens, we can never let our guard down. 1992 was a perfect example. There were only 7 named storms and 4 hurricanes that year, a below-average season. One of those hurricanes was Andrew, one of only 4 Category 5 hurricanes to make a U.S. landfall. I'm sure the people who went through Andrew in 1992, that August, would not consider that year to be a quiet season. We will also watch sea surface temperatures and just how many disturbances come off the continent of Africa that could eventually become a tropical system. In the end, it all comes back to the beginning. All it takes is one.
Now, since 2015, we've seen 58 tropical storms and 29 hurricanes form in the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Sea, and the Atlantic Ocean. Here in the Low Country, we saw a few of those up close and personal, including Matthew in 2016, Irma in 2017, and Florence last year. Their formations were predicted before each season began, but not their intensity or path. Here's Daniel Brown with the National Hurricane Center.
You'll hear a seasonal forecast. You probably hear several of those seasonal forecasts in the coming weeks. But when you hear them, just know the season's fast approaching. The seasonal forecast doesn't tell you where the storms are going to form, where they're going to go, and unfortunately who's going to get hit. So the key really is to be prepared each hurricane season as if you might be the one to get hit.
Now, no storm is the same. Each has its own laundry list of impacts. But as Storm Team 2 meteorologist David Dixon explains, its category isn't everything when it comes to a storm's impact on life and property.
Hurricanes present many devastating impacts: wind, rain, storm surge. But for many in preparation for a hurricane, wind ranks over all others due to the widespread use and the common knowledge of the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Wind Scale. This scale estimates property damage and assigns it a category 1 through 5, with 5 being absolute destruction. Therein lies the problem, as the category assigned to a hurricane is based on its wind speed and nothing else. Winds are just one part of the hurricane, and in fact not even the deadliest impact.
Historically, half the fatalities of tropical systems has been storm surge, another 25% in the inland flooding. So it's about water, totaling up to be 90%, including offshore fatalities. It's all about water. So we've tried so hard at the Hurricane Center to separate those impacts from that category.
Ken Graham heads the National Hurricane Center, who is working to reduce that number by issuing storm surge watches and warnings, in addition to the hurricane and tropical storm warning since 2017. Hurricane-strength winds may only extend over a small area and over a short amount of time, while flooding rains may reach far inland, hundreds of miles, and last for days, even when the hurricane is no longer a hurricane. The Carolinas saw this firsthand with Florence last year with devastating impacts, which, as you remember, made landfall as a Category 1, proving that just a Category 1 is not a phrase that should dictate your hurricane preparation.
Everybody concentrates so much on these categories, but here's the statistic that we need to talk about. In the last decade, Category 1 storms have killed 175 people and caused $103 billion worth of damage. It is not about that category. It's about the impacts of whatever category, even if a tropical storm, and in some cases, no name. If there's impacts, that's what we need to prepare for.
Meteorologists will still categorize hurricane intensity via their wind, as it is a real-world measurement that we can take from hurricane hunter missions or classify from damage surveys. But if you focus only on that impact in a hurricane, you're placing yourself, your loved ones, and your property at risk.
Next on News 2.
Now, when it comes to learning about storms before they hit, hurricane hunters brave the strong storms to get us that information. We take a look at their work after the break. When you are evacuating, they're flying in. The hurricane hunters are the only 2 air crews allowed to fly into the storms. Storm Team 2 was able to meet members and see the planes that fly into the eye of a hurricane for reconnaissance and research.
Hurricane season starts June 1st, but before then we traveled down to Brunswick, Georgia, meeting National Hurricane Center members as well as the hurricane hunters to give us a check what to be prepared for hurricane season.
This was one stop of a 5-stop tour of the East Coast to promote hurricane awareness and safety and to show off these. 2 aircraft operated by 2 different organizations, both designed to fly into hurricanes and other storms. The big gray one is a WC-130 operated by the Air Force Reserve's hurricane hunters. Its main mission is reconnaissance, passing in and out of the most intense part of a hurricane, eye wall, while onboard meteorologists take readings of the storm. Sensors called dropsondes are dropped periodically via a spring ejection system to map the vertical profile of the hurricane.
From June 1st until November 30th, we have a watch schedule, so we are standing by for any sort of tasking that may happen.
Robert Mitchell is the aircraft commander of the other aircraft, a WP-3 Orion used by NOAA.
We've got nicknames for each of our planes. This one here, NOAA 42, is Kermit the Frog.
It has cut its teeth on numerous missions inside tropical storms and other intense hurricanes since the 1970s, including one close to home, Hugo. It has a few more bells and whistles for research, including 3 radars added onto the plane, one in the tail, one underneath, and one in the front.
And that allows us to get a view of that storm just like you would from your WSR-88D radar on the ground. And we can send that data in near real time back to the researchers at the Hurricane Forecast Center.
That's the main reason for these flights, as Daniel Brown with the National Hurricane Center explains.
So when a storm is out over the open ocean, we have to estimate the storm strength from satellite pictures. But when a storm is close enough to land or threatening land, we can fly the planes into those storms, and then they can go in and measure just how strong the storm is.
Storm Team 2 will keep you updated on the forecast throughout hurricane season.
For more information, head over to our website, counton2.com. I'm Storm Team 2 meteorologist David Dixon reporting from Brunswick, Georgia. Count on 2.
All right, thank you, David. As hurricane season gets underway, there is no way to know for sure how the season will play out for this area. Storm Team 2 meteorologist Ariel Hooley has what you need to do before, during, and after the storm to keep your family safe.
Before the storm, your preparations should begin. First, develop an evacuation plan. Know where your family would go if evacuation orders are issued. If you have a pet, make sure they can come along as well. Local animal shelters will not take pets during evacuations. Flashlights, water, food, first aid kit, and cash are all must-haves in your hurricane kit. Take the time before the storm to inventory personal property and important paperwork. Make sure you have copies of anything that you might need. This includes insurance paperwork for your house, car, medical, and life insurance. Those plans should be reviewed as well. Meteorologist Ken Graham from the National Hurricane Center reminds us
It really doesn't matter the number because it's not a forecast of landfall. There could be one storm on planet Earth. If it impacts you, it's a busy season. So preparedness should be the same whether there's a lot of storms or hardly any.
once a storm is forecasted to impact the low country, if you decide to stay home, stay indoors, away from windows, walls, and doors. Electricity could be lost. Best way to stay informed? A battery-operated radio. Do not depend on your cell phone in the aftermath of a hurricane. Meteorologist Michael Brennan with the National Hurricane Center says,
the lives we live today, how technologically advanced we are, everybody has these. Well, these might not work after a hurricane. So how are you going to even get in touch with people in an area where there's no cell phone service, there's no power? You have to think about all that. And if you're asked to evacuate, again, that's the reason you're being told to get out. It's not just for the life-threatening hazard of the storm itself, it's the aftermath.
After the storm has passed, that's when the cleanup begins. If you have evacuated, it's best to check with local officials before returning to your home. Make sure to travel during daylight hours. It's easier to avoid down power lines, damage, and flooded roadways. Plan now and be ready to act. That is the best line of defense when it comes to hurricanes here in the Low Country. In studio, I'm meteorologist Ariel Hooley. Count on 2.
Now, before a storm even forms on our radar, you can make sure you are prepared by building a hurricane kit for you and your family. Here are some things you will need. Cash, as ATMs might not work after a storm. 2 gallons of drinking water per person per day for at least 7 days. A 2-week supply of prescription medications. Flashlights and lanterns. A battery-operated clock and radio. 2 sets of extra batteries per device. Non-perishable food. Hygiene items and disinfectant. Baby items and toys for children. And of course, rain gear. We have much more on your kit and your evacuation zone online in our hurricane guide. That's at counton2.com.
Next on News 2.
We certainly are no strangers to flooding here in the Low Country. We'll explain why and break down what you can do to keep your family and property safe this hurricane season. That's coming up after the break. Flooding is a major issue here in the Charleston area, and it's getting worse each year. Meteorologist Ariel Hooley met with an expert from the National Weather Service in Charleston to see why this is the case.
It's in the name, Low Country. Blair Holloway, lead meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Charleston, says our coastal flooding issues have only increased.
And if you look back like in the 1980s, we averaged somewhere around 9 events per year, coastal flooding. But then if you look now, in the current decade, we're averaging around 36 to 37.
During tropical systems, we experience 2 types of flooding. Flooding due to heavy rain, and storm surge, caused by strong winds pushing salt water onshore. The influx in new homes compounds this issue, according to Holloway.
Before that development, the rainwater would be able to fall and soak into the ground or run off into different streams or marsh areas. But when you go in and you clear that out and you put a bunch of concrete down, that water can't immediately soak into the ground. It gets kind of immediately turned into runoff.
Know your risk for flooding. It's a simple way to keep yourself and your property safe.
Know if you're in a flood zone or not. There's lots of resources available out there to determine what your risk is to flooding based on your elevation. Obviously, if you're at a lower elevation, you're at a higher risk to things like storm surge.
Some homeowners insurance does not include flood insurance. So give your insurance company a call to double check if you need an additional policy. Most will have a waiting period before that flood insurance kicks in. Also, make sure to move important paperwork and personal valuables to a higher location to reduce the risk of flood damage. For Storm Team 2, I'm meteorologist Ariel Hooley.
That's all the time we have. As a reminder, please go online to counton2.com for more information about hurricane season and download our Storm Team 2 Hurricane Ready Guide and app for the latest information right to your phone before, during, and after the storm. Thanks for joining us. For all of us here at Storm Team 2, I'm Storm Team 2 Chief Meteorologist Rob Fowler.